Okay, is that better? Sorry. Huh. Okay, fingers crossed it was recording. Sorry, Dean. Okay, luckily we've got the what do you call it? The captions on. Okay, so in the methods, you want to make sure that um, you are defending any unusual technique if that's what you've used. Your participants, how are you selecting them? Are they going to be of a certain age group? Are you looking at only people who've been in the industry for 5 years? Or are you looking at people who haven't started yet? Or are you looking at um, female representation within the industry? Who are you actually targeting and why? And how are you going about collecting the data with that group? So have a look at study designs. There's a lot on the internet that you can use. It's fine if you have a look at other information about how to do research projects. They're all much of a muchness. And your methods section talk about exactly what you did in order to gather your data. Also, you can mention how you're going to analyze the data. So if you're using a specific tool like SPSS, or if you're just going to use a thematic analysis, or how are you actually going to use the data that you get back? Have you used a 5-point Likert scale and then given people open text to respond to questions, and then you're going to gather that together and analyze the themes that come out of that? So you just want to be really specific. Okay, so then once you get your data back, you need to analyze that data and look at what the raw data tells you. So look at the dental technologist's perspectives and report that back in the findings. Usually this is done in tables or graphs depending upon what you're collecting. So the other thing to think about here is that no interpretation um, happens in the results section. You don't say what you think it means. You simply say, out of the 25 people surveyed, 17 people said they strongly agreed with this statement. 5 people said that they strongly disagreed. And then you can also join the dots by saying that as a result of the 25, only those who had worked 10 years or more strongly disagreed, etc. So you can do a little bit of cross analysis, but you don't then say what you think that means, because you need to hold that back for the discussion. So the discussion gets you to analyze all of the results you got back and then say, okay, if 17 out of 25 people thought that their right arm RSI injuries occurred after 5 years of working as a dental tech, but they didn't ever report it, what do you think that means? So you can say that it appears that there's a high incidence of this sort of injury, but the culture within laboratories means that people's jobs are at risk and therefore they're reluctant to report it, or that there's not good protocols in place for actually reporting things, and the documentation doesn't exist, or policies don't exist, or whatever you think might be going on. If you do that, you then want to back that up with the literature that surrounds um, other typical laboratory protocols and processes, and say this is consistent with, you know, what Brown and Jones found when they did their research about policies and work and health and safety in dental labs, or something like that. So you interpret what you think you've found in your data, but you then put it back into the context of the literature and what other people are saying about this. You might find that within the 5 laboratories that you surveyed in southeast Queensland, they have a very different response than the 20 that were surveyed in the UK. There might be reasons for that. There might be policies in place that protect them, or that their situations might be a lot worse. Or, you have to try and decide, okay, I've got the data back. What do I do with that? How does that help us understand this issue in any more detail? And then you also compare that to what other people have found in their research. So you position your research within the other literature that you've looked at, and then identify and discuss whether it's the same or whether it's different. So make sure that you're clear about what the technologists are telling you, and then analyze that, comparing it to the other literature. Okay, so that's just a bit of a summary about the difference between the results and the discussion. Sometimes people are a little bit confused. So the results are, what did you find? And it's usual visual graphs and tables. And then, so what? What does that tell us? Why did something happen or didn't happen in that particular instance that other people have found either the same or different too? When you're representing your data, we usually have it in some sort of numerical form, and it's often represented in a graph, because this helps you communicate that to the person who is looking at it. And what you're trying to pick out is sort of patterns and relationships and trends that are occurring with the data, because that tells us something, that builds a picture. So you might use pie charts, you might use bar graphs, you might use figures or diagrams to try and show what you think the data is telling you. If you look at, say, for example, something like this, where you were looking at COVID cases in 2020, and you found that there was 1,072 cases, and out of those, 1,061 people recovered and this was on a particular day, so the 21st of the 7th, and then you had 6 deaths and so forth. And you've got all of that data in an Excel spreadsheet, and that allows you then to insert a bar chart. Even though that's a super handy way to collate your data and use sort of some of the techniques available to you, be careful about what you end up with and try to understand whether it makes sense. So let's say you use that data to do that. If you put all of the different variables along the bottom, and then you've got these really big numbers, it doesn't tell us much about these smaller ones. So it's not a very good representation of that data. And you have to look at the data that you get back and think, right, how am I going to put this together so that it really does make more sense? And then you can think, well, maybe I want to talk about the number of cases and the deaths and recoveries, and then I want to talk about sort of some of the other qualities, and maybe I need to split this into 2 graphs. So you might decide that you want number of cases and those who recovered, because then you can adjust the numbers at the side to make that more relevant. And maybe you want to mention something about how many of those people were First Nations people or something like that. So there's different ways for you to then present that information. So by not only putting the bars in a sort of cluster, but also putting the numbers at the bottom so that people can see it clearly. Don't make your reader excuse me, have to do the hard work. Put the numbers there so they can clearly see what you're talking about, like the second example. So it's a much better way. The other way is to then also split. So you can see that these lower numbers were then all grouped, and you can see that the figures at the side therefore can be a lot smaller, and it makes that bar chart a lot more relevant. And you can have your big numbers over here representing one aspect of that topic, but then the smaller numbers show the other aspects that you're trying to bring out. So be careful when you're transferring the data, the raw data that you get, into some sort of visual demonstration or pie chart or something, that it still makes sense and that people looking at it can understand what you're talking about. So by the end of the results section, you should start to get a sense of the data itself, how it was analyzed, and then what value it might have in telling us something. So the graphs that you include are not just graphs for graph's sake. They have to have some value. We have to, why are we looking at this? Don't just take the data and convert it. Too many studies do that, and it's kind of useless. Don't make people look at tables, like endless tables of numbers. No one really wants to do that. You can attach them as an appendix at the back if you want to validate why you've got certain figures in there, but you want the visual representation to add value to the report. So this is just a bit of a checklist for you to go through when you've finished writing up your results. And then the discussion, as I said, is what those results are telling you and the significance of that. So again, there's just a summary there for you to use as a checklist when you're writing your discussion. Your conclusion should restate the aim of your research and restate the main findings and connect it back to theory and practical implications, but also acknowledge the limitation of the study. So in this case, you've only got a few weeks to do it in, and you've got a limited budget and a limited time frame and probably a limited geographical area. So then you might say that within this small study, you found something that would really be of value if we could do a nationwide study based on those preliminary findings. And that's a good thing to know, because if you do decide to go on and do further research, maybe you use that as the springboard to a bigger project. So this is kind of like a little, test run so that you get a bit of a sense of how this is all set up. References and formatting, you've got APA 7th style referencing. So make sure that you are aware of that. It's author date, so the author's surname and the date when it's in text, and then the full reference in the reference list. And as I said before, things like the interviewing schedules and the questionnaires and consent forms and plagiarism checkers and things, they're all attached as your appendices. So when you're writing your conclusions, there's a bit of a checklist for you to think about the broader implications. When you get to the conclusions, it's different to the discussion in the sense that you're coming back out and saying, well, why did I bother looking at this topic? What relevance does it have to the field of study? And why, from the data that we've collected, what does it kind of help point us in the direction of knowing something more about? And is that something that we can apply ourselves? Does it relate to our future careers? Does it relate to the other people I'm talking to when you do your presentation? That sort of thing. Your course has a exemplar, and it's got a really lovely study in there, and it's beautifully laid out, etc., done from a previous student. So go and have a look, have a sneak peek into that course, into the exemplar, so that you can see how your report should end up looking. And even if you couldn't find that one, just Google something similar in terms of your research topic. Have a look at the articles that you've already collected in your literature review, see how they've set out their research reports, and then use some of the phrasing and some of the ideas that go in each of the sections to help you write yours. It's always nice to have a good model to look at, so you go, oh yeah, that's what a methods section looks like, that's what a results section looks like. So don't be scared to do that. It's a really good technique. Your referencing list, you've got your APA 7th manual on the library website, so make sure that you use that, or you've also got your health writing and referencing guide on the left-hand menu bar of your course site. Lindsay, did you want to just briefly talk about the aspects of what goes into a reference list?
Yes, sure. So, I mean, we can just work from this slide. So, of course, you guys can see the surname of the author, followed by the first initial and then a full stop. And when there's two authors, you will separate them with an ampersand. If it's just one author, no worries. And if it's multiple authors, you include all the authors. You don't include et al. The et al is only included in text. So yeah, and you can see then we have year in parentheses, and then we have our article title in sentence case. So sentence cases means that the first letter of the first word, retention, is capitalized, where we have the rest of them are lowercase. The only exception to that is when there is a colon. You can see retention and attrition of students in higher education, colon. Then the first letter of the next word is uppercase. Now, followed by that, we have the title of the journal in italics, and that's all in a title case. So every letter, the first letter of every word is capitalized. Following that, we have our volume, also in italics, and our issue not in italics, comma, and then your page number. And don't forget the DOI, guys. With electronic sources, DOIs are always necessary. And so make sure that they're written as well as a URL. So they need to be written as they would function within a browser, so that the reader or the marker can easily navigate to that article from the DOI, the URL DOI link you have provided.
Excellent. Thanks, Lindsay. So in your course site, you will also see these videos, which just give you a quick reminder of how to set up your reference list and how to use in-text citations, both using APA 7th. So if you've forgotten how to do that, they're only short videos. Have a quick look at those. And I'm just going to have a quick word about writing paragraphs before we finish. So when you're writing a paragraph in an academic way, you need to know that they are the building blocks of everything you write. So you will have fairly consistently sized paragraphs all the way through, not just 2 sentences here and 20 sentences over there. Think of them like bricks of a building. Each paragraph has one key point that it is making, and everything that is in that paragraph should then support that key point. You will need evidence and examples of the key point to convince your reader that what you're saying is correct. And as a general rule of thumb, they're about 200 to 250 words long. So if you know that you have a 500 word limit on a section, in your mind, you can think, wow, I've only got 2 paragraphs to write the background information I need to get done. So use that as a bit of a rule of thumb to give you a bit of a hand when you're doing the layout of your report. Each paragraph itself has about 6 sentences because you need to establish the key point and then back it up with evidence and conclude it. Your language, as I've already mentioned, has to be very direct and clear, and you can tell that if you only have about 250 words to make a point and put evidence in, you have to be really concise and deliberate with the language that you choose. So the sentences are not just a list of facts, they all join. So go back and make sure that your paragraphs flow not only between paragraphs, but within the paragraph itself. And that you are linking back to your main topic. So, what is your main research question? Don't lose sight of that when you are talking about some of the other sections. Sometimes it's helpful to think of them like a ham sandwich. Your top sentence in a paragraph is what is my point? And then a little bit of an explanation about that point. So the cheese, the meat in the middle is all the evidence that proves that that point is good. And that could be connecting it to theory or statistics or the data that you have collected. Sometimes there's a counter argument where you want to show that you have a broad understanding of the point and not everyone agrees, and that's usually helpful in your literature review section, particularly if there are debates about a topic. So usually sort of the second last sentence is where you might say, however, Jones would argue that it's not specifically the chair itself that's the problem or whatever. And the bottom piece of bread is your so what sentence, your concluding sentence to the paragraph. So you have, what is my point? Explain it. Where's all the evidence? And then what else do I need to talk about? And so what? So there's sort of this pattern that goes on in each of your paragraphs. Make sure that the language you're using, the terminology is correct, but also don't forget that if you are using something you think your audience won't know, make sure you explain it. It is clear and concise. You are being logical and you've supported everything that you're talking about, either with your raw data from the field study that you have done or from literature that you have read. Don't overclaim at the end when you're writing your conclusion. You are not solving the world's problems in the dental tech field. You are simply looking at a couple of labs within Southeast Queensland and you're trying to find out one more thing that we don't know. So keep it tight. Be cautious with those claims by using the words may or might. So it might be that this is caused by that. You would need a much bigger study to try and prove that. And if you don't feel confident with your writing and in an academic kind of way, go and have a look at the Manchester University Phrase Bank. It is set up specifically for writing research reports and it gives you fantastic sentence starters in every section. So the introduction, the method, the results, the discussion and the conclusion, it's all there for you and it's a fantastic resource. So I would urge you to have a look at that if you don't feel comfortable writing those parts of your report. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly show you how to get around an issue that we have seen in these kinds of reports before. Let's say you got all your data back and you had a problem because you wanted to find out about people taking time off due to work injuries, but your data said no one did. And you think, well, I don't have anything I can possibly write. Yes, you do. So instead of saying no participants reported taking time off work due to injury, you could say, although the data reveals that none of the participants had taken time off work due to work-related injury, other research, such as Larson, Milson, and Adams, suggests that the workplace culture of most dental laboratories is similar to the car mechanic industry, where acknowledgement of injury is seen as a sign of weakness against employees and amongst employees and also actively discouraged by employers. So injuries may be occurring but not reported. Now, if the data showed you that and you thought it seemed unusual, and lots of other literature research was supporting the fact that the sort of subculture of dental techs laboratories are that you never take a day off, or if you do, you pretend it's a hangover and not a work injury or something, then that is an interesting finding that your data is also supporting that theory that exists. So don't think that the results you get back have to be perfect. Get your results back and put them within the context of the literature that you've already been searching, and you might actually come up with something quite interesting. And you could then make a recommendation that a much bigger study is done looking at workplace culture rather than just work-related injuries. So yeah, that is just a bit of a hint. If you get back data that you're not expecting, don't be dismayed. Also, finding out different things helps other researchers to know where to look. So if you've looked in a particular pocket of information, so you've asked lots of people and you've got a type of response, then maybe other researchers won't waste their time doing that. Maybe they'll come at it from a different angle. So that is also really useful for them to know. So there's a thing about publishing unsuccessful sort of data collection as well as successful. As long as your data collection method is really rigorous, it still tells you something. If all of this seems a bit tricky and you're a bit stuck, you can go to our it used to be an online inquiries, but now it's a request form, still looks like the same symbol. You click on that and it'll take you through to a form that you fill out and ask to have a meeting with either someone like myself or someone like Lindsay. And if you forget all of that, just go into the library, go to the front desk and say, this is what I'm having a problem with, and I would like to speak with a librarian or a learning advisor to help me actually, get my report happening or find a bit more literature that supports the things that I'm looking at or something like that. So don't hold back. There is a lot of help available to you, and we are more than happy to help you with your queries. Make sure you give us information about how we can help you, and then we'll be in touch. So the key messages are, please start writing straight away. You can write your introduction, your literature review, and your methods section while you're waiting for your data to come back. You will need to do a couple of drafts. So you need to get down your ideas and then come back to them a few days later, and also have time to think about how they compare to the literature. Make sure you let Jane know how you're going. Get in touch with us if you get stuck, and don't leave everything until the end of September, because you know that on the 3rd of October your report will be due. So you need to get started now. Okay, good luck. I hope all of that helps and makes sense. Thank you, Dean, for being here. Did you have any questions that you would like to ask us while we're here? Excellent. All right. Thanks, Dean, so much. And thanks, everybody at home. Apologies if the audio was not working for the first half. Thank you for alerting me to that. And luckily, we had the captions on, so hopefully you will have all of that. I will download the recording for those of you who were not here, but if in the meantime you want to find it, just go into the collaborate section and go up to the little menu, the 3 little lines, the hamburger lines, and download the recording from today. Okay, thanks everybody.
Bye everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Lindsay.
Bye.
Bye.